for the investigation, and I began to feel as if I had no other option but to leave the academy. I decided to begin asking for open-door policy meetings with my leaders, hoping that I could speak to them in smaller, lower-tension settings to ask for their mentorship and determine why my situation became so distorted. My entire chain of command denied me. I then asked Lieutenant General Caslin, Lieutenant General Caslin, I emailed you in desperation to let me speak with you privately before you made decisions on the misconduct reported against me. You too denied my request. I desired the chance to add context to those grim black and white words that you chose to judge me by, prepared by somebody else like those papers you have today. That I found that one JAG captain had influence over almost every factor of my case. I wanted to tell you that I was sorry for the mistakes I did make and that I looked up to you as a leader. Even with those mistakes, I did not deserve to be treated the way that I was. I later found from a DoD agent that you stated you cared greatly for me as a cadet, and you instructed my chain of command to protect me and aid my success in any way they could. Unfortunately, I never heard these things. From my perspective, each time I reported an action, I received punishment. And in denying my open-door policy request, you confirmed my suspicions that I was not wanted at your institution. If I had felt my chain of command truly cared for me and wanted me to succeed, I would have felt differently about my situation. It was the idea that the chain of command had given up on me that ultimately sealed my actions to leave the institution, despite my desires to serve my country. I do not blame West Point as an institution for my situation. I blame a systematic failure of leadership who relied on blind loyalty to make judgments about an individual they had never spoken to. I believe if the open-door policy had been a reality and I had been allowed to tell my side of the story to the leadership, I may have been able to stay. A system of investigating and prosecuting complaints of assaults that leaves great power in the hands of one individual or single individuals, motivated by career and institutional goals, is not an effective mechanism for victims. After signing my oath, the first thing given to me was a small business card with the Cadet Honor Code. Next, written on the board, was a soldier's creed. I am an American soldier. I am a warrior and a member of a team. I serve the people of the United States, and I live the Army values. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. And later, I am disciplined and I am a professional. These are the words that inspired me to continue, even when I had nothing to gain and everything to lose. When I decided to report to help better the academy instead of following advice to keep my head down and not say anything. These are the reasons that I would also like to return to the academy and complete my time there, as I believe actions speak louder than words, and simply coming here and stating a problem does nothing to guarantee a solution with no action. With the support of Congresswoman Spears' office, I have decided to reapply for admission to the United States Military Academy to finish the education and training I began in 2012. I truly believe that the military and West Point has made positive strides to fix this problem and understands that assaults occur on many college campuses, but the service academies specifically should be role models for the nation and the world. Former Cadet Bullard and I were part of a group of 4 individuals who were friends who reported sexual assault or harassment at the academy. Out of the 4 of us, none remain. West Point and all of the service academies are the functional units of change for the future of our armed forces. There is much more work to be done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Ms. Kinzior, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. In 2008, I was a recruited athlete who was inducted into the United States Naval Academy. Prior to acceptance, my parents were concerned for my safety given the then sexual assault scandal which was unfolding at the Air Force Academy. And during a campus visit, my parents and I were told by the Naval Academy representatives, including my coaches and the athletic director, that the Naval Academy did not have a sexual assault problem and that I would be safe. Shortly after the academic year began, I experienced 2 horrible and traumatic events. I was raped not only once, but twice. Both times by fellow classmates in my company who I had to face every single day. My emotional state began to deteriorate and went to the Naval Academy Medical Facility. During my intake evaluation, I told the treating physician that I had been raped, who did not ask when, did not ask where it had occurred, but simply checked a box on my intake form and prescribed me an antidepressant. These events set the tone for my remaining 2 years at the Naval Academy. The culture at the Academy is that of a boys-only club, where men are considered superior to women, where women are frequently referred to as dubs, which stands for dumb, ugly bitch, or other derogatory terms, which most women want to be accepted, say nothing, and quickly adapt to the culture. After 2.5 years of sheer emotional hell, I broke down mentally and was sent by my chain of command to the psychiatric ward at Bethesda Hospital. I spent 3 days there and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder by a nurse practitioner, not a licensed medical doctor. I thought that if I could get a transfer out of my company, that I would be okay, and I made a request every semester to my company command, who refused to transfer me every semester. I felt my life slipping away, and as a final effort, requested mast with the then Commandant of Midshipmen, Captain Robert Clark. Upon discussing my situation with the Commandant, he told me to grow up, and within days began the separation process. In July of 2011, an academic review board was called, which I thought was unusual given my overall good academic record. During my hearing, members of the board openly discussed my sensitive personal medical records, all of which without my consent, and in the end, used my past medical treatments as a basis for my separation. The Academy found it easier to label me as having a personality disorder than to treat me for the trauma of being raped. It seems the motto of the U.S. Marine Corps, "Leave no man behind," does not apply to the men and women who are raped. Instead, they're frequently and intentionally left behind to deal with the pain, anguish, and long-term emotional stress, while the rapist's career continues without any consequence. The Navy continues to defend the ever-growing claims of military sexual assaults at the Naval Academy as small, and that those women who reported being raped were just mentally ill. How shameful. Military leaders then and now defend the growth rate as being good, claiming that they are glad to hear that women are coming forward to report their rapes. What they don't seem to get is that more rapes are bad, and that they continue due to their failure by military leaders to address the root cause, that there's a small but active group of rapists whose crimes are rarely investigated, let alone prosecuted, and the military finds it easier to destroy the life of the victims. The word is out. If you're a rapist, go into the military, where you'll be protected after you rape somebody. I was processed out of the academy while my rapists are now serving as officers, potentially victimizing more people. Victims who see the treatment of those before them, such as myself, are not likely to come forward like I did, for they know what will be the consequences. Upon leaving the Naval Academy, all forms of medical treatment and counseling ended. I was on my own to fend for myself. Thanks to the support of my family, I was able to get the treatment I needed, which began with weaning me off the drugs prescribed to me by the military doctors, drugs that created the very personality disorders I was exhibiting. After more than 5 years of detox, I am now off of all prescribed medications and am in PTSD treatment that was developed, in fact, by a former military Green Beret. I was denied the opportunity of completing my education at the Naval Academy, given I only had 1 year remaining. I will never forget the day that I had to return my class ring, which represented the 3 years of hell that I had to endure. All I wanted and asked for was to complete my education while getting proper treatment and serve my country as a naval officer, all of which was denied to me by my Naval Academy leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenzior. If I'd like to ask each one of you, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the policy or procedure that you would most like to see changed in sexual assault cases? Midshipman Crane, let me start with you, and then I'll move to the right.
As for a policy change that I would like to see, the policy and the way I reported was so easy for me. It was so effortless. I just had to walk down to the SAPR office and tell them my story that I didn't want to. I didn't feel the need that there was anything that I would have wanted to change about it, about that process, about the reporting, about the whole, the case itself. For me, it just worked out very well. It was a very positive experience in that manner. So I wouldn't be able to provide a good answer in that. So.
Ms. Bullard?
So I've experienced sexual harassment, so if you don't mind if I speak on a policy change that I would like to change on that. In the recent report about sexual harassment and sexual assault, I see the only change they've done for at least sports team is what they call a teal team, where cadets will wear T-shirts, and when they go to this game, they get free concessions. And this is their awareness for sports, for sexual harassment and sexual assault. And I don't believe that an It's On Us shirt is going to fix a problem for cadets. I think there's a deeper understanding that's missing there. So if there was a policy that I think needs change, I think it has to start from the cadets, and I think that there needs to be some sort of understanding again.
Thank you. Ms. Gross, what is the policy or procedure that you would most like to see changed in sexual assault cases?
Yes, sir. So one of the reasons cited that General Caslin was unable to meet with me for the open door policy was that...
Please move your microphone a little
Oh, I'm
closer.
sorry, sir.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. One of the reasons cited that General Caslin was unable to meet with me for the open door policy was that he was conflicted as I was under investigation for misconduct. And I understand that his position requires him to have that oversight and not be in conflict. But if the open door policy is specifically for retaliation under sexual assault or harassment, maybe there is some provision that can be made so that these victims can go to the superintendent if they need to, if that's the only person left that will talk to them.
Okay. Ms. Kenzior, what is the policy or procedure that you would most like to see changed in sexual assault cases?
So for me, my first person to report to was a fellow midshipman. I believe he was a senior at the time. I was a junior. And that, in my opinion, was wrong. I don't think I need to be telling what happened to me to a fellow classmate or even a person who's a year older than me. If you guys don't know, the academy, at least the Naval Academy, is a huge rumor mill. Rumors spread fast. And telling a peer just opens that door up to more rumors. As for another policy, I believe that they should not be just educating the midshipmen about these things. They should also educate the leadership and the staff of these academies to be able to help identify signs of those who are raped, maybe go to them and ask and talk to them about it. For right now, midshipmen are just trained by their peers, and that's what I went through, a training of midshipmen teaching midshipmen, and to be honest, nobody took it seriously, at least the classes I attended.
Thank you, Midshipman Crane. I don't know if you mentioned this, but some of them panelists have mentioned retaliation. If you experienced retaliation, was it through social media or in person? And also, if you experienced retaliation, did you report that?
So in my case, the person who assaulted me was in the same company as me, which provides a very unique situation in which I have to see that person every single day. We have mutual friends. We were in the same class, the same company. In terms of retaliation, people found out very quickly that something was going on, and he was more alike than me. So what ended up happening is more people didn't know which side to choose. It became almost like a choose a side situation in which I was presented the opportunity to leave the company as to not experience retaliation. So I chose, it was either him or me, but I decided to leave the company because I felt more comfortable in leaving the company than having to experience, in case I would have experienced retaliation if he had left and then I had stayed. So in terms of that, that's how I dealt
Thank
with
you.
that.
My own time is expiring, so if you could all go very quickly. Ms. Billard, what I think you mentioned experiencing retaliation. Was it through social media or in person? And did you report the retaliation in and of itself?
Yes, sir. I did report the retaliation, which caused me to receive more misconduct on my part, and not on my part, but people retaliating against me, and I'm having misconduct taken against me. And again, to your first question, I think there's too many hands in a pot for investigations. The investigating officers, most times than not, have some sort of relations either to someone who's in charge of me or someone in charge of someone of my victim. It's sorry. Sorry, I'm being really emotional right now. But I think there needs to be a third party that's checking on this, is what I'm trying to say.
Ms. Gross?
Sir, briefly with my case, an app called Yik Yak was very prominent at the academy during this time, and so unfortunately a lot of my retaliation among my peers occurred on the Yik Yak app. I walked around campus with very visible bruises on my neck that couldn't be hidden by uniforms, and so it was very public who I was given the name on the left side of my chest. And so, or the right side. And so from there, I couldn't report it because there was no way to determine who it was. It was just liked by 300 people. Secondarily to that, I was moved 4 times. And I was asked the first time to move, second time I was not. And that's usually considered a problem at the academy.
Ms. Kinzer, can you be very quick? I'm sorry, I'm over.
Yeah,
my
for me,
time.
it was a lot of rumors. They were rampant. Like I said earlier, I was labeled a slut who got around. But really, my process of separation happened really quickly. So most of the retaliation came after I was already separated from peers contacting me and saying negative things towards me about what I did.
Ms. Spear?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hold my questions to the end and allow my colleagues to my left to ask theirs.
Ms. Saunders?
Well, I thank you all for being here. This is certainly an issue that this committee has spent a good time looking at, and you're providing additional insight that's much needed. It's so hard to tell your story, but I appreciate the determination and tenacity all of you are bringing to your presence here and to your continued desire to serve your nation. I thank you for that, despite all of this. We've focused a bit on the assaults, but I'm curious about the cultural issues. And I think much of the sexual harassment that you all experience is rooted in a culture that has yet to fully embrace the diversity of the corps, the different corps that you're part of. And what I'd like to hear from each one of you is, let's just say from the day one, as you made your way into your particular academy, if you experience things that you would like the academies to take note of as they begin to think more broadly, not just about the particular crimes, but how they create an inclusive culture. So we'll start with you.
Thank you. From day one, I would definitely say that it is important to note that the upper class play a huge role in setting the command climate of each company. I was a plebe when this happened, and I came into this and I thought this was okay. And that to me was scary. And I knew deep down inside it wasn't okay, so I reported. But I had the support of my roommates at the time and my very close friends, and it was good that they had supported me in reporting. But at the same time, I didn't feel confident in relying in that chain of command of midshipmen at the time. So the culture does have an impact, especially the training and the awareness that the upper class have, especially on plebes, on underclass, in regards to sexual assault and harassment.
Regarding mine, I would say kind of similar to what Ms. Kenzior said. There's a loyalty there. My time, especially on sports team, I know very well. I had to swim with a guy that I dealt with sexual harassment. Every single day I saw him, and I'd have to swim with him in that pool. And there was no overlay. He was a swimmer. I mean, we're both swimming in the same place. There's no way that I could get away from him, especially in that atmosphere if I wanted to keep up with my sport. So I would say that along with the fact that as soon as I opened up my case for sexual harassment, the whole team battled against me, because you don't tell on the team. You don't get the team in trouble. You don't give negative feedback about the team because you're drawing attention and you're getting people in trouble. And so eventually that's what led to me swimming by myself for 2 weeks before my big championship meet. And I have to tell you, that was probably the hardest thing I had to do, was see every single one of my teammates. No one said a thing. No one said a thing about me swimming by myself. And then they assumed I had special treatment. So, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think this problem begins with the fact that we have different standards than men do, and that's really, it's needed in a lot of different ways because we are physiologically different than them, but because we have lower standards physically, the men do initially think that we're lesser than them because we can't perform at the same level that they do. And so that starts in basic training from day one. And then in basic training, as we go out to the field and we're doing these operations and all these different things, now the women are segregated and we're sleeping by ourselves out to the side. So the men are participating in the shooting exercises at night, but the women are off to the side because they don't want us sleeping next to the men at the academy. So now we're further segregated. And that starts the issue there from the day one that we're at the academy. When they take the woman out to a different place, that segregation causes the issue. And like Midshipman Crane said, it starts at the lowest level. When the sophomore cadet teaches the freshman cadet about leadership, and when the graduates of the academy go out to their posts across the world from their first platoon, and show leadership skills for the first time. So.
Thank you. And we don't have much time, but I'd love to hear from you, too.
No problem. So I also second Midshipman Crane about how the upper class sets the tone. One of my first sexual assault prevention classes as a plebe, we were told a story about how a female had said that a star football player had raped her. He was separated accordingly, and that in the end, she had actually lied about it. And they finished that story with, "Don't be that girl." That's what they tell us, told my class at least, in that sexual assault prevention class.
Thank you all. I appreciate your being here today.
Mr. Russell, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you ladies for testifying today. Midshipman Crane, are you familiar with the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program?
I am.
How effective would you say that it is in an effort to deal with these issues that you experienced?
So I would say in the terms of training midshipmen, I've kind of seen it evolve since I was a plebe. It's definitely come a long way. I definitely saw how there was a bit of cynicism as a plebe when I was going through these classes, and how now as I'm becoming an upper class and I'm getting closer to the fleet, the midshipmen are really taking a hold of it and making it more of a positive thing. People are participating. Mainly the guys in the class are the ones that participate. In terms of people getting the summer training so that they can become SHAPE representatives, like that's also really huge. I'm seeing really positive people taking those positions, and I'm really impressed as to how it's changed.
Do you, as a future leader in our armed forces, do you feel that this equips you with the tools to deal with cases like this as you counsel and work with your future sailors or Marines, depending upon where you're going to be branched?
I do think so, to some extent. I've definitely had like some lessons where I'm just like, that's a little off topic or not, doesn't really apply. I do see that if there were a way to incorporate actual midshipmen, actual midshipmen victims into these classes, it would make a bigger impact. People would see that and be like, that is my peer, that is my friend. And people would listen to those classes especially more.
Well, and I thank you for that. And, I think all of us on the panel agree, or in the committee, that even one incident is unacceptable, certainly in our military. But as we see the responses and how to deal and improve this situation, it's important to get that kind of feedback from each of you. And now I'd like to switch a little bit to the Army. Ms. Bullard, do you think that the SHARP training, are you familiar with the SHARP training? Do you think that's a useful tool and its content is helpful or not helpful for cadets?
I believe it's helpful to an extent, just like Midshipman Crane said. It has to come from the cadets. Just simply having an upperclassman present a media file about sexual assault and sexual harassment isn't good enough anymore. It has to come deeper from within. And so relating and having a peer come up to another person saying, hey, this is what happened to me. You guys have to understand that, this happens. And the funny thing is the culture, most cadets believe that almost every single report is a lie, when actually almost 90% of it's true. And that's just the culture. Most cadets don't believe in any woman that reports. I mean, most of them, everyone jokes around about that, especially on Yik Yak that Ms. Gross explained.
Well, and along the lines to address some of this, Ms. Gross, if I may, and I'm not sure if it was in place when you were a cadet, But there's the RESPECT program, which targets those who demonstrate a lack of maturity or engage in acts inconsistent with the Army values. You had mentioned the Army values, such as sexual behaviors or sexist behaviors.
Yes,
Was the RESPECT program implemented while you were a cadet there? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. The Respect program was very active. Actually, Cadet Bullard had more experience with that after her harassment complaint. The cadets were subjected to going through that program. So I'm not completely familiar on that topic specifically.
Sure.
I would like to say, though, that the Air Force Academy, Cadet Bullard talked about having peers. And the Air Force Academy is a program called Peers that acts within the companies and it supports those ideas of respect mentorship.
Do you feel, based upon the three of you having, the most recent experience, and Ms. Kensor, I very much, was moved by your testimony, and thank you for that. But do you see these programs getting at the criticality of the issue? It's just a matter of massaging the implementation, including more feedback from the cadets or the midshipmen. Do you feel that the programs are viable, but it's a matter of execution?
Absolutely, sir. And I think it's very important, I know I'm running out of time here, that Cadet Crane's point is great. And she said that when she got there that the programs were evolving. 2 years ago is when she started the academy. And we were there 2 years ago, and that's when we were leaving. So that evolved now over the last 2 years, and it seems like it's making good progress. It just needs to work.
So I guess and I really appreciate this feedback. It gives us a unique opportunity to query. But it appears that the leaders in trying to address this very real concern, because we all believe, in being a former military leader with decades of service, one incident is unacceptable. But it becomes critically important to know, are the programs being implemented, do they have value? And so I really thank you for those responses. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mr. Gallego, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, first of all, for being so brave and coming forward and informing, educating us and the public. This is not ever an easy for anybody, but especially in the limelight. I'm concerned from hearing your individual testimonies and please correct me, that there wasn't any education in the entry program, whether you're a plebe or you're a cadet. I'm not too far removed from college, but I do remember my freshman orientation, we were specifically told what consent meant, what were the consequences of not having consent, and that there was a very defined, and I did not go to an academy, but there's a very defined process if you were accused of sexual assault, and that you would be removed from the school, and also, if possible, turned over to the local prosecutor for prosecution. When you all were entering your schools or your academies, is there a portion within that first week where cadets or plebes or whatever are explained to them that this is what is considered consent, this is what's not considered consent, and do your classmates understand that? We could start with Midshipman Crane.
Most people agree that during that first month when you get to the academy, it's all quite a blur. But I do recall there being a brief about the Sapper and Shape program, what is consent. There was a semio there. But at the same time, like, you're also not focused on those things. You're so busy with other things, the task at hand. But yes, there is that brief, that initial brief.
And when that brief only occurs one time in the career of a cadet?
No. That brief happens quite often.
Okay.
It's update the midshipman, the grade.
Ms. Bullard?
I concur with Midshipman Crane. We do learn about that during our beast training, and it's just about, I guess, implementation, just like Mr. Russell said. I mean, it's just cadets, I don't think, are necessarily understanding the severe rationality about what's actually occurring. And I mean, most cadets just don't think it's real. And that's why I think we all mentioned that hearing from your peers and hearing, real stories would be a lot of help.
I actually have a different experience, and my basic was in 2012, Miss Bullard's in 2013, but I don't remember anything from my basic training about sexual assault training. I remember ruck marching for 12 miles. I remember sticking people with needles. I remember running. I remember a very impactful honor code speech that, spoke with me. I remember respect, but I don't actually remember a briefing on sexual assault. So obviously it wasn't impactful enough to carry with me through that period.
Thank you.
And I pretty much concur with that as well. I'm the oldest of the bunch. I entered in 2008. If there was a briefing, I don't remember, or I just wasn't really focused on it at the time. I had so much other things to deal with.
And follow-up question again for the panel. Do cadets actually understand the consequences of their actions? Do they understand that they can be prosecuted under the UCMJ and that obviously they would be kicked off? I know that sounds like a very silly question, but you're dealing with young men that may not understand because their command has not told them that this is not acceptable, or for some reason they somehow think that they're not going to be prosecuted. Do you believe that the academies, respective academies you attended, did not properly communicate to your fellow cadets and midshipmen the consequences of such heinous actions? We start with Midshipman Crane.
They were definitely told the consequences briefly, but like anyone, you can be told the consequences but not understand what it is to go through the consequences of committing an act as that. I do think there might need to be a little more focus on what would happen to you if you were to do that to someone. But yes.
Ms. Bullard?
If you don't mind if I'm just being blunt,
Yep.
I mean, if it's prosecuted, I mean,
Right.
they understand, I guess, the consequences, and it's just words, but most times not. I mean, if it's prosecuted, if it's searched right, I mean, you hear all our stories, and it wasn't investigated right. And this seems to be a trend. So, I mean, and most people, I mean, if you look at our investigations and some of the stuff that some of the men have gotten away with, it just lets alone, it causes a trend, and it shows people that that's okay, and that's not right.
Thank you. Ms. Grossen.
I concur with what Ms. Bullard said, and specifically for our academic year where our assaults were reported for 14-15 report, there was 14 reports made that year. Only 8 were finished by the end of the report. There was only 1 cadet that was discharged for a sexual assault related offense. My cadet, who was founded on assault, was discharged administratively for a non-related offense. I'm not sure why, but at that point, maybe they do know what the punishment is, but they see that the statistics of them actually getting discharged for that are very low.
And I'll end with, yeah, they did communicate the consequences, but obviously the consequences aren't upheld, so
Right.
they don't feel threatened by it, in my opinion.
Thank you.